What's up, boys and girls? It's been several months. Life kind of got busy. We both jumped into headfirst into basketball season, but that's over. We're in the middle of March now. March Madness has fallen upon us, and as we're recording, the bracket has just come out, and so we're going to react to it. We're going to talk uh, all things basketball, college basketball heading into the season, and we'll go from there. Eli, anything you want to say to the people?
Yeah, glad to be back. Also, shout out to the Tigers, number one overall seed, War Eagle. We'll see how it goes. I'm excited to be back. Excited to talk a little basketball for the first time. But yeah, number one looks good on us. I ain't gonna lie to you.
All right, let's do it. All right, Eli. A lot to break down. I think we have too much Auburn gear on. I don't think people know that we're Auburn fans. I really didn't plan on wearing two different Auburn things, but here we are. Number one overall pick, overall team in the bracket. I don't think that was a surprise to anybody. Best strength of schedule, even though they've dropped the last three out of the last four. I think the overall body of work spoke for itself, and I don't think it was a surprise to anybody.
Yeah, some people were talking on Twitter today. Patrick Young from SEC Network talked about it. He goes, "I just don't see how Florida's not the number one overall seed." Well, I don't understand how a guy who played college basketball and he's on a network television show doesn't understand that number one overall seed is your complete body of work over the season, not a few games in the tournament. Now, Florida's the best team in basketball right now, but it's not about who's the best right now. It's about who's been the best over the 5-month period we've been playing basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And Auburn did it in November. Auburn did it in December and basically in January. Kind of tripped up late February and then into March. But the resume speaks for itself. They've beat, I think, 16 tournament teams, 17 tournament teams or something like that,
Sounds like
maybe
that, yeah.
more. So, yeah, number one overall seed for a reason. They earned that. They're struggling now, but they took care of business enough to be the number one overall seed.
It definitely did. And I wouldn't say necessarily Florida's the best team. They're the hottest team, that's for sure. They're the
No,
hottest
they're the
team.
best team.
They're the best team. I mean, they definitely. I mean, they put it on Tennessee today. I didn't actually watch it, but from what I was keeping up, Florida was at once Florida got a 10-point lead, it never really got below that. I don't doubt Tennessee fought hard, but Florida is just
Yeah.
hot right now. But
Yeah.
the biggest thing is they're healthier than a lot of these teams. The biggest conversation all weekend was Cooper Flagg spraining his ankle. And that was all they talked about. They didn't talk about how Duke became a better team because of Cooper Flagg spraining his ankle and how those guys stepped up and got better. Everything
Yeah.
I've seen is Cooper Flagg sprained his ankle, Cooper Flagg sprained his ankle, and I've seen that video so many times.
Yeah.
And it's just that Florida's definitely the hottest team right now. Definitely the hottest team right now. Something I want to start off with, since we're talking about Florida and Auburn. SEC got 14 teams into the tournament. 14. Now, that was kind of expected. Someone at the beginning of the season, they were like at least 10, but 14 teams. Now, uh, Texas is playing in the playing game. They're the only one. Them and I think it was Arkansas were the only ones that were kind of sketchy. But because they play in the SEC, and there are 12 other quality teams, that they got into the tournament.
Yeah. I was thinking 12, to be honest with you, because of body of work. But when you're Texas A&M, or not Texas A&M, but Texas, and you have the opportunity to go into the SEC tournament and play Texas A&M and beat them, that helps you over a team like Xavier if they play like a Seton Hall or something. The fact that you can play quad one games in your conference tournament is huge because they used to say quad. Last year it was the tournament didn't matter. The seedings were already set. But this year they wanted to say the conference tournament mattered. So either it does or it doesn't. This year it mattered for Texas because they beat A&M, who's a 4 seed. A team like Arkansas beating Kentucky in Rupp kind of solidified their opportunity. That gave them the confidence to kind of finish out their schedule. And they beat some other teams, and I think they beat Mississippi State, who's an 8 seed. So, like, you're beating tournament teams, so that helps you get in. I don't think – I mean, 14's cool. but teams like Georgia, Oklahoma, they're in there, but how long will Oklahoma be there? I believe they play UConn,
Mm-hmm.
and they could beat UConn. I don't think they will, but they could.
Mm-hmm.
So teams like that, you're just like, I mean, are they going to make it past the first round?
Right.
So 14 teams is cool, and that just says a lot about how the league is because they're that good. You're playing quad one games every day
Yeah.
outside of LSU and South Carolina. And so when you're doing that, it's kind of hard not to put that many teams in. But on
Yeah.
the flip side of that, if you're any other conference, it sucks because there's 31 automatic qualifiers, and the SEC has 13 more onto that because Florida's the automatic from the SEC. So you add 13 more, and so there's 44 spots already taken.
Right.
And
Well,
so,
in the
I mean,
top eight seeds, between the ones and the twos, you got four SEC teams, and Auburn, Florida being ones, Alabama and Tennessee being two seeds.
which and both of those are deserving. Like
Oh yeah,
that's
all four of
absolutely
them.
correct.
Yeah, all four of that is correct. I firmly believe that. If Tennessee beat Florida today, Tennessee still probably wouldn't be the one seed. I think it still goes to Florida.
Yeah, it
They
would have
may have
been
given it to
between
St. John's
Alabama
or
and
Michigan.
Florida.
Yeah,
If
or
Alabama would have
even
beat Florida, then Alabama would have taken the one seed, and whether or not they lost to Tennessee. And so
I think so.
when Florida beat Alabama and then beat them by 20, that solidified them as that fourth one seed.
I think so. I agree with you there. But you mentioned quad one games, and last year it was like the conference tournaments don't matter. It's all about the quad one wins, quad
Yeah,
one games, and even this year there was so much talk about quad one wins and quad one games, like Auburn winning 16 or 17 this year and still losing four of them. Insane. I mean, they have four or five more than anybody else in the country in quad one wins. But I take this discussion here. UNC made the first four game with one quad one win. I think they're 1-15, 1-16,
1-12, one and
or 1
12.
and 12, 1-12, and they with three losses to Duke. And we can talk about their loss the other night. That was ridiculous,
Yeah,
utterly ridiculous. I don't know what he was thinking or what he was doing. Anyway, but being 1-12 in the quad one, they're playing their best basketball right now.
yeah, absolutely.
Going into the last two Duke games, I think but going into the season finale against Duke, they were like 6-0 in their last six games, and then they got hammered by Duke at home, and then in the tournament they won a couple games, and then they took Duke
Yeah,
down to the wire. Should have won that game, and so
which that
it
last game, the Carolina game at Chapel Hill, the last game of the year, they had an opportunity. Cooper Flag was in foul trouble the entire game. They were getting to the rim. Like RJ was scoring. RJ Davis was scoring. They were getting everything they needed. And then down the stretch, they just stopped. Like the
yeah,
offense wasn't getting, which it kind of reverted back to what their issue has been all year, is then they get into possessions where they turn it over and they take horrendous shots.
right,
Like outside of Auburn, the team that I've watched the most outside of Auburn is Carolina.
yeah,
Just because I'm Easton's big into it, so like we'll watch all those games. And there's just times where Elliot Cadeau just can't hang on to the basketball. RJ can't hit shots. They have no post game, which their post game's gotten way better, and that's why they're better offense. Vin Allen Lubin,
right, yeah,
who they picked up from Vandy last year, has changed the way he's played. Jalen Withers has played well. I mean, he sold the game for them the other night, but he's played well. But I'm gonna read this stat to you. So Indiana was the first team out.
right,
And so it goes Carolina's in. Carolina's 1-12. Indiana has the better quad one record, but let me list you the quad one games that Indiana has played. At Ohio State, not a tournament team. At Penn State, not a tournament team. At USC, doesn't even have a winning record. At Iowa, at Northwestern, those are all quad one games. At Arizona State, 6 games below 500. At Utah, 500. At UCF, home against Baylor. All of those are quad one games for Indiana. Who did North Carolina play? They played Duke 3 times. They played Auburn. They played Florida. And then they played Alabama.
mm-hmm,
Like you're playing now, should you have won a couple of those games? They had the Florida game won and they blew it.
yeah,
And so I didn't really think that they should have been in based off that. And they dropped a quad 3 game at home to Stanford. That kind of stinks too. But I can't. I I can see where the argument for Carolina fans come in about their quad one record, but you have to win those games. You have to
mm-hmm,
win one or two. They had the opportunity to beat Duke at home and didn't do it. Cooper Flag barely played in the first half, and then you had a chance the other night, and of course like we said, we could talk about it later, but Jalen Withers stepping in the paint during a free throw kind of sold that for them. So I didn't think they should have been in, but I can see where the argument they did what they needed to in quad two, and quad three outside the loss to Stanford. So that's the argument that I could pose for Carolina being in. But you can pose that, but it's not about who you played and lost to. It's about who you beat, and they just
Yeah,
didn't beat them.
they
Just
just
didn't beat them.
couldn't. They couldn't handle it. And so if they win, they go. I believe they go play. Yeah, they go play Ole Miss, and Ole
Yeah,
Miss is not a slouch. I mean, you
and
know, Ole
they'll
Miss is
match
a
up
pretty
well
good
with Ole
team.
Miss.
Yeah, I, that's just the biggest talk, especially on Twitter. That's what I've seen is the biggest is like
Yeah,
is UNC making it, and it's not necessarily Indiana. I've seen a lot of people saying West Virginia got cited.
West
I don't know
Virginia.
much
Okay,
about West Virginia.
West Virginia was the first team out. And they said today on the selection show that with the DeVries kid, that's their best player, being hurt, they take that into consideration. But apparently it didn't have that big a deal
Well, if they're
for
taking best
them.
players hurt into consideration, why is Duke still number one? Oh, he'll be back for the tournament. There's heavy speculation they may not play him versus or whoever they play, either American or Mount St. Mary's. There's big speculation that he won't play until Saturday. Or
Yeah,
what do they play?
Friday first, I think.
Yeah, they 23rd. No, they play 21st. 21st is when is
Friday.
20 Friday? Yeah.
Friday.
So Friday. He won't play till Friday. So it's it's just interesting that's part of it. And so I mean, but looking at the tournament, we both have the bracket in front of us. Looking at the bracket, who has the hardest draw? Who has the hardest side of the bracket, in your opinion?
And this isn't even being Homer or anything. It's obviously Auburn. Obviously.
Has to be.
I mean, you look at the 8-9 for Auburn, it's Louisville, who in the AP poll they're ranked 13th. Over the past 7 years, the AP poll ranked 13th team is doesn't go lower than a 6. They sit around that 5-6 line. They could jump to it. They may be a 7, maybe, but it usually is a 5 or a 6. And they dropped all the way to 8. And you could see the coach when they announced it, he holds up 8 fingers and goes, 8? Well, then they're playing Creighton, who's the third best team, or the second best team in the Big East. They were the 2 seed in the Big East and played St. John's yesterday. I mean, so assuming Auburn wins the 116 game, they either play Creighton or Louisville. And if they get Louisville, they're in Lexington.
Right.
So they get Louisville in Kentucky. And then you got Michigan. But like this is just full of storylines. You got Michigan, Trey Donaldson, the transfer from Auburn, the point guard there. You got A&M, who Buzz Williams has beaten Bruce Pearl 6 out of the 8 times they've played.
Mm-hmm.
Yale's in there. Everybody knows about Yale. I mean, Iowa State, they played him at the beginning of the year. All that kind of stuff. Like in that entire side of the bracket, I mean, you got the second best, or the regular season champion as the 2 seed in Michigan State. Iowa State was one of the best teams in the Big 12.
Marquette.
You got Ole Miss. Yeah. Which we can talk about those teams later, but this is compared to the other 1 seeds, that Auburn looks like they have the toughest one.
Definitely. And the 8-9 matchup between Louisville and Creighton is one that was very interesting to me when I saw it. That was incredibly interesting. But then it goes to, well, how deep is the SEC and how weak the ACC is? Yeah. How weak the ACC is, because Texas A&M lost in the quarterfinals to Texas, which ultimately is the game that got Texas into the tournament. I firmly believe that. And they're the 4 seed in this, even though Duke is the runner-up in the ACC. That's either a testament to how strong the SEC is. Yeah, Louisville. Sorry. That's how strong the SEC is, or how weak the ACC is.
Yeah.
Because the ACC was weaker than it's ever been.
Well, and so
go ahead.
What's up? Oh, if you think about this with the ACC, Duke played Louisville Saturday night for the championship. That was their first ranked opponent since they played Auburn. The first week of December. We're in March. And that's not a hack against Duke. Like, they can't help who they play. But the ACC is so bad. Or mid. I mean, they're not bad. They're just not
weaker than normal. They're weaker than normal.
And, yeah. And so when you look at that, you're like, okay, they play Louisville, who's the 8th seed in the tournament. and that's their first ranked opponent since playing Auburn the first week of December 4th. Who they beat? They beat Auburn. So like they beat the teams that they needed to beat to be in this conversation of, okay, maybe they could have overtaken Auburn for the 1 seed, but you just couldn't do it because you didn't play anybody in the conference. So,
And that's the way it seems for sure. I mean, so if we're looking at the South Regional. Auburn is number one overall, playing either Alabama State or St. Francis, and then 8, 9 Louisville, Creighton, and then Michigan's UC San Diego, then Texas A&M and Yale. Which is Auburn was a 4 seed last year, Yale was a 13 seed. So people are calling to look for that matchup. I think Texas A&M is too tough right now. I don't know much about
yeah,
Yale, but Texas A&M's but
they
the
can shoot it.
SEC was so physical this year. It depends on how referees are going to call the game, and
Well, it's just going to be
so
tighter. It's going to be tighter. They're not going to let them play as physical.
it's
That's
it's
100%.
yeah.
But if A&M rebounds the basketball like they always do, there's no way
Hmm.
they lose that game. Like if
Yeah,
they just play, unless
and
Yale shoots like
this.
60%.
We've talked about this several times, but one of the reasons Auburn's dropped a lot lately is rebounding. Even in Saturday's or in the loss against Tennessee, they were out rebounding Tennessee most of the game, and they ended up with 8 less rebounds than
Yeah, toughness.
Tennessee.
It's
They
all
quit
about
rebounding.
toughness.
And so, and then you have Ole Miss who takes on the winner of San Diego State and North Carolina. If North Carolina gets hot, they're a tough team to beat. They have all the pieces. They just got to put it
Yeah,
together and stay consistent. Their biggest
and
problem is consistency.
and they match up well with Ole Miss because Ole
They
Miss doesn't
definitely,
have a
yeah,
true big, and Lubin's been good for them. But it's all about guard play, and both of them have older guards with RJ and then Elliott's a sophomore. But you got to be able to contain guys like Murray, um, and Padula. Like Padula is the real deal, but they've seen him at Virginia Tech, so they know what he's about. And then of course
right.
Brakefield and Morrell are still there, so Jamian Brakefield's pretty good. He's just had an injury-filled year, but Ole Miss is good. But that'll be a really good matchup if Carolina beats San Diego State. That'll be a really good game in that first round.
Yeah, and then whoever wins that's most likely going to have to play Iowa State unless Iowa State just drops a lot, just
Well,
drops the ball. And they know they have some injuries right now, but unless they
yeah,
just absolutely drop the ball and they lose to Lipscomb,
Lipscomb's got
then
two, which I live in Nashville, so I know a little bit about what they got going on. Will Pruitt leads the way for them. He's up for Player of the Year in their conference. I don't know that he'll win it, but he's up for it. He's really good. Can
they
really
haven't
shoot it.
voted
And
on
then they
that
got
yet.
no, not for well I think they may have, and I just missed it. But
Everybody should have.
he was up for that, and then they've got two 7-footers that can play. But can they play with Iowa State? I don't think so. But that could be an interesting one to watch for sure.
Yeah,
And then Michigan State, Bryant, and Marquette, New Mexico, which I'm going to call that one now. I think New Mexico is going to
interesting,
beat Marquette. And
interesting.
then Michigan State and Bryant, that's a wash. I think Michigan State beats them by 20.
Yeah, and something interesting about Marquette. Some people are saying Shaka Smart's up for some of those bigger jobs, such as
Indiana.
Indiana, and a couple other bigger names that have popped up. Like who was it that fired Villanova? Fired their
Villanova.
coach, and so a lot of people saying he could be going there, but I don't think he is. He tried his name at he tried his day at a bigger university at like Texas, and it just didn't work out for him, and he went back to
Yeah.
Marquette. He wasn't stinking it up at Texas. He just wasn't winning to their
They weren't
expectations or
great.
even to his
Yeah.
expectations. So they left there, and then they winded down Michigan State and Bryant. Michigan State has had quite a quiet year. You haven't heard a lot of people talking about Michigan State. Or at least I haven't. I haven't seen a
No.
lot of talk about how good they really are since January because it's all been dominated by Duke and the ACC and the SEC
Yeah.
and Houston.
Uh,
And so
yeah. I like
go
Michigan
ahead.
State a lot. Jace Richardson, they put him in the starting lineup, which is the son of Jason Richardson from the Warriors. They stuck him in the starting lineup, and he's just scoring like nobody's business. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they've got the pieces to make a run as well. I mean, they're the number 1, 2 seed, I believe. I think they're the top 2 seed. It may be Alabama. I don't know, but um, Michigan State, I think they have an opportunity to do something in that region. I think I'm going to put them. I'll probably get them to the Elite Eight. But I just never doubt Izzo. I just can't.
No, and
So
I think he's got a good team this year and they're ready to go. Moving on to
absolutely.
the West Regional, we got Florida and Norfolk State. Norfolk State's right down the road from us. I pass that quite often driving different places. Norfolk State making it out of the MEAC tournament, and I want to take a brief pause here. I tried to go to the MEAC tournament for 2 years in a row, and to get tickets for one day is over $200 for the MEAC tournament.
It must be a small gym.
No, it's like several thousand. It's a hockey arena. It's
That's
several
crazy.
thousand people. It's like I think last time I looked it up, it was close to nine, and you have the floor seats in and everything. Anyway, I digress. Florida, Norfolk State. Florida, like you said, the hottest team with a record of 30-4. They're the hottest team in basketball right now in college basketball, probably even in the NBA. And they don't even use their 7'9" guy, and
Yeah, he can't
so
play.
look for them to make a Final Four run. And then you have UConn and Oklahoma. And depending on who you ask, that could be similar to Louisville and Creighton type
Absolutely.
matchup. Could be a Louisville Creighton type matchup because Dick Vitale and even Seth Greenberg from ESPN, both of them are really high on Oklahoma. Really high on
It's because they
Oklahoma.
can score it.
They can score really well, and they're coming from the SEC, so they're definitely going to be the more physical team. But UConn, back-to-back national champions, haven't lost the tournament game in 2 years, obviously.
Yeah.
And I mean, they haven't had the year that they've had previously, but they're still
But they're sitting at
23 and 10.
yeah.
23 and 10, and they're not, and they got a good coaching staff, and I think he kind of reined it in a little bit. So that could be an interesting matchup for Florida as well. And then moving on, Memphis and Colorado State. Memphis has had a quiet year as well. I believe they won both the regular season and their conference tournament, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And that's one of those all the 12-5 matchups are always, interesting, but that's a 12-5 matchup because Colorado State can play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, teams that are in the tournament, they can all play, but their leading scorers averaging 19 points a game. I think it's Nate Clifford or Nick Clifford is his name. 19 points a game. He shoots 50% from the field, 9 rebounds, 4 assists. It's Neek. It may be Nick, but it's spelled Neek. So Nique. But Neek Clifford, 19, almost 20. He's at 19.7 points per game. And then 9 boards, almost 10. He shoots 50% from the field. And so, I mean, like that they can score it. They can play. I don't know how well they can guard, but if you're looking at just straight up team, 12-5 matchup, that's a scary one. 16-4 in their conference, 25-9 on the year. Like they can play.
Yeah, Memphis is definitely, yeah, they won their tournament and they beat UAB to do it. UAB is on the rise. I forget their coach's name. I really like him. I can see his face. I can't remember his name. He used to be the coach at Ole Miss.
Who you talking about?
Um,
At
oh,
UAB?
UAB's,
Oh, Andy
yeah.
Kennedy. Yeah.
Andy Kennedy. I like him as a coach. I think he's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Oh, hey,
Anyway,
before we move on,
yeah,
not Norfolk State.
Colorado
Colorado State
State.
opens as a 2.5 point favorite in that game too.
Really?
I'm telling you,
Wow.
because that's not that big of a surprise for me. Because I mean, they can just score, dude. I don't know what it is.
But that's the way the game has gone. I think we talked
Yeah,
about it last summer when we were talking about the Olympics. Everything's gone to scoring. And so you see these SEC teams, and it's like it's a defensive matchup. No, it's a fouling matchup. They hold, they
yeah,
grab, they push, they get away with a lot. I mean, we complain about officiating a lot, but honestly, both teams in the SEC could foul out a lot. It's just
yeah.
my problem is consistency, and Pat Adams needs to retire.
Yeah, he's not
Uh,
good.
I think he's been refereeing in the SEC longer than you and I have been alive combined. So he needs to retire. But anyway,
Yeah,
moving
but
on.
that's an interesting one. So that's another one of those 12-5 matchups that's going to be really, really fun to watch.
Absolutely. And then Maryland and Grand Canyon, I've heard a lot of good things about Maryland. I never really got to watch them, but I hear they're one of those that can keep up with near about anybody in the
Yeah,
country as well.
write the name Derek Queen down. He's one of the best freshmen in the country. I've watched Maryland play a couple times. I got to watch him play Michigan yesterday.
Hmm.
He can play, and
Yeah,
so I think they'll win that game. But don't sleep on Grand Canyon and Bryce Drew. I think he was at Vandy. I think he'll probably find a higher job here in the next couple of years too. He always has Grand
probably.
Canyon in the tournament.
Yeah, Grand Canyon has been a consistent
Yeah,
consistently
Foster.
dominant in their conference. And we'll go back. Let me go back up to the South Regional because we kind of skipped over Michigan. But what Dusty May has done at Michigan in 1 year is incredible,
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. Because Juwan Howard he had a high with them, and then they immediately started tanking back down. They just don't think they had consistency. They took, like you mentioned earlier, Trey Donaldson from Auburn, who's a true point guard who can score when he wants to.
Yep.
I think Dusty May has done an incredible job with Michigan Wolverines.
Well, you mentioned Trey Donaldson, but they picked up Namari Burnett, who's a great shooter,
Correct.
and then they get Danny Wolf from Yale. But they play two centers. They play Danny Wolf and they play Vlad Golden. Golden
Yep.
came up with Dusty May from Florida Atlantic,
Yeah.
and so their starting five is very, very good.
Yep.
They just won the Big Ten championship today, so that's a team to watch. I don't know how they're going to make it. I don't think they're going to make it out very far out of that side of that bracket though. That South
Yeah.
region's stacked.
Yeah. And then we go down to the number 6 seed in the West Regional at the bottom of the bracket, and it's Missouri versus Drake. I heard some people calling for a Drake upset there.
Yeah,
Uh,
Drake's three different coaches in 3 years, and they just win.
30-3. They're
They just
30
win.
and 3, and they're 11 seed, and they're playing Missouri. Missouri's a tough team, and I think their coach should have been SEC Coach of the Year from not winning an SEC game at all to finishing in the top. I mean, the 6 or 7
6.
SEC was really tough this year, but for them to have the season that they had was impressive in the turnaround. So a lot of people are calling for a Drake upset, and I'd like to see it happen just because I don't like Missouri at all. Don't think they should be a part of the SEC. Moving on, Texas Tech versus UNC Wilmington. UNC Wilmington. Texas Tech probably going to blow that amount. I don't know much about UNCW, regrettably, but Texas Tech is a really good team this year. And then an interesting matchup. Interesting matchup is Kansas versus Arkansas. A lot of people thought Arkansas probably wasn't in there, but you got to look at the quality of wins. Like
Yep.
you said, going into Kentucky, winning there, and I think they've been playing their better basketball here in the last month and a half. But Kansas not having the season that everybody thought they would have. Started out the year as number one, as typically they do, but they've kind of figured it out here down the stretch. But they just need to be consistent.
Well, if you're tough with them, they're soft. Hunter Dickinson's soft. Like Jonas Aidoo's going to bump him around a couple times and get him frustrated. Arkansas might get Boogie Flan back, their starting point guard. If they get him back, I mean, he doesn't change a ton, but that's just another guy that can facilitate and get other guys to basketball. So
Mm-hmm.
guys like DJ Wagner and Big Z, they can get better shots. And then you got Nelly Davis as well, the FAU transfer. And so the more that Boogie Flan can facilitate and get them the basketball, and if he can score a little bit for them, I think they'll beat Kansas.
Absolutely. And then you have the number 2 versus number 15 matchup, which is St. John's. The Godfather, Rick Pitino, is in everybody's good graces again, and he's taking on Omaha. This is Omaha's first bid, if I'm not mistaken. It's their
Yep.
first bid to the NCAA tournament, so that could be a fun game. St. John's has just been dominant all year long. It's
Their
been
defense is
dominant all
elite.
year long. And so I fully expect Alabama State to win, going back up to the South Regional and the first four. We kind of skipped over that. I fully expect Alabama State to beat St. Francis because St. Francis has a 16-17 record. Of
Yeah.
course, Alabama State is 19-15. So, but I fully expect Alabama State to win and then go get beat by Auburn in Lexington, Kentucky. Moving over to the East Regional. We have Duke versus the winner of the American versus Mount St. Mary's game. I believe Mount St. Mary's will probably win that game, but I don't know anything about American University. But Duke, we mentioned earlier, Cooper Flag being hurt, probably not going to play in that game because they won't need him. But they said he'll be back for the NCAA tournament. How far do you see Duke going?
Probably to the national championship game.
National
And like
championship game.
I don't want to be that person. Like I've always been on the side that Duke hadn't played nobody and things like that. But if they can play without him that way, and then he comes in and gives them more confidence, because look, it doesn't matter who you play. When your best player goes down and you can still win games, I mean, they beat Carolina and then they beat Louisville without him.
Mm-hmm.
And so there it is right there. You're like, okay, we can play without him. Add him into the mix already with our confidence as high as it can possibly be, and we can go win. And then if you look at who they play, I mean, you'll get Mississippi State or Baylor. They'll beat either one of those teams. And then you got Oregon. You can get Oregon, Liberty, Arizona, or Akron. And I don't know which game it's going to be, whether it's Oregon or Liberty or Arizona or Akron, but one of those teams is going to get upset. I just don't know which one it's going to be.
Yep.
And so you have an opportunity to play a mid-major team in the Sweet 16.
Absolutely. Well,
and so
one of my biggest beefs is Duke getting to play in Raleigh this year. I almost bought tickets for that, but I waited a week and it jumped up $50. But Duke getting to play in Raleigh at it's hosted at NC State, the arena they play in, where the Hurricanes play. But Duke getting to play there, that was strictly financial. But here's something, and this has been our pet peeve the entire time. Oregon, Liberty, Arizona, and Akron are all in the East Regional. Guess where they're playing at? They're playing in Seattle. What sense does that make? The only people that benefits Oregon.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Arizona. Arizona's at the bottom of the map, but Akron and Liberty, ain't nobody trapped. We found that out when Liberty made whatever bowl game they made with Bo Nix, the one in Arizona. They're not going to travel that well. They're not big enough yet, and so anyway, that's the stuff the committee that really bothers me. That's the stuff that really bothers me. Anyway, moving on. So Mississippi State and Baylor. That's going to be I mean, these 8-9 games are incredible for me.
Like all these teams are on the same level. Like
right,
all these 8-9 games.
These are going to be the games to watch. Well,
yeah.
like right here, I have it written down, games to look out for, and all 4 8-9 seeds are the ones to watch. The ones to watch. You have Louisville and Creighton on Auburn's side in the South Regional, and then you go to the West Regional, and it's UConn, Oklahoma, and now you have Mississippi State and Baylor in the East Regional, and Mississippi State and Baylor can most likely keep up with Duke. I firmly believe that. Mississippi State's been hit or miss this year, but they've been a quality team all year long.
Yeah.
And now and then they take on a Baylor team who's been I mean, they haven't had their finest year, but I think they've been consistent enough. They can keep up with Duke. And so your interesting matchups this year are 8-9. And so that's the really interesting part for me, which sets up some really interesting second round games between the one seeds or for the one seeds.
And just to clarify, I think Duke can make the national championship. I don't know that. Like, I filled out a bracket right here just like off of a gut feeling. I'll probably go in tomorrow and make my official bracket. But, like, I could see Duke with the teams that they play making the Final Four. But they would have to beat teams like Alabama, Tennessee, and that's going to be tough for them to do. Well, I'm not saying that because they're SEC. I mean, they could lose to Oregon straight up. I don't think they will, but they could.
I firmly – if Duke makes it to the second round, that's going to be a tough game for them, either Mississippi State or Baylor, specifically Mississippi State. And they go to the Sweet 16, they'll play either Oregon, Liberty, Arizona, or Akron. I feel like they could breeze through the Sweet 16, but they get to the Elite Eight, and it's most likely going to be Alabama. Because if we go down to the bottom side of that bracket, or the bottom part of the East Regional, you go BYU versus VCU. BYU's had a decent year, but I don't see them giving any kind of trouble to Duke. Do you?
No, and I think VCU is going to upset BYU.
And that's the thing. VCU could beat BYU, and then you go down to go ahead.
BYU can score so well, but VCU is one of those that can like just cut your water off. Like they can just keep you from scoring. Now they come out of the A-10, and so anything could happen. I mean, obviously you would think BYU would win that game, but I think if VCU can keep them from scoring the basketball, they can beat them. Because I mean, BYU just beat Iowa State in the tournament. But that's just a game. That's one of those. It's an 11-6. I think that VCU could beat BYU.
Definitely. And then to the next one, Wisconsin, Montana. Wisconsin has to have had a crazy quiet season to be a 3 seed in this tournament. It is very interesting that they're a 3 seed sitting at 25-9. And then Montana, that's going to be interesting. Both teams are 25 or Wisconsin 26, and then Montana's 25. So And then moving on, St. Mary's is the 7 seed against Vandy, who's a 10 seed. Vandy's had some quality wins this year. They fought Auburn hard. They beat Tennessee. Didn't they
They
beat
beat
Florida?
Kentucky.
No, they beat
They
Kentucky.
didn't
That's
beat
who it
Florida.
was.
They beat
They
Kentucky.
beat Kentucky. That's who it was. And then you go to Alabama and Robert Morris. So we could have a second round matchup between Alabama and Vanderbilt. And the way Alabama's playing right now, I'm assuming they'll make it to the Elite Eight, judging on
Now,
this side
you
of the
got to
bracket.
remember, I 100% believe Alabama could make it all the way. They're a Final Four team, but Grant Nelson's hurt, and they don't know when they're going to get him back.
Really, I
They
didn't
said he
know
was
that.
better. They said he was better today, but he has a lot of swelling in his knee, and he's seeing a knee specialist tomorrow. And so they could be without him for that Robert Morris game. Obviously, I would think that if he could go, he'll go in that second round. But if they don't have him against St. Mary's, I think they could still win. They're still going to win that game, but it makes it a lot tougher just because
Especially
of
if
how he can
Vandy,
spread the floor out and
yeah.
how he defends.
Especially
And
if
so,
Vandy can get some momentum, they can play Alabama tough. They're a tough
yeah,
team to put away.
they're
But
a good first half team.
Well, Alabama's been relying on Grant Nelson a lot their last few games because in the Auburn game he started hitting 3-pointers again, and even into the
Yeah,
SEC tournament, their first game, he was consistent. He was hitting 3-pointers. I didn't get a chance to watch the Alabama Florida game because we had a youth event, but I think that Florida's just a buzzsaw right now, no matter what you do.
yeah.
And so it could very well,
Bama was winning by a point when Grant Nelson got hurt.
yeah, and very well could be a Duke Alabama or 1 and 2 matchup in the Elite Eight. It very
Mm-hmm.
well could, depending on how Duke does through the second round, and Alabama in the second round as well. All right, moving on to the Midwest Regional. Houston, number one, very deserving. Houston is a tough, tough team, an incredibly tough team. And then SIU Edwards, I had never heard of them until today. And that
It's
they're
their
my
first ever tournament appearance.
yeah, so that makes sense. So good for them. Um, SIU Edwards, I'm assuming that's Southern Indiana University Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
So uh,
Edwardsville, yeah.
yeah, and then Gonzaga, Georgia. That could be another interesting matchup. Georgia's having one of their better years. I think this is their first time making it in like 20 years or something, or they're looking for their first win in 23 years. Um, and Gonzaga is just going to be Gonzaga. So that's definitely an interesting matchup. Definitely an interesting
Gonzaga,
matchup.
Gonzaga's a top 5 scoring team in the country,
Right. They always are.
and you're seeing them as an 8 seed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's. I think they'll beat Georgia, and then Houston's going to play the number 5. It's like they're the number 4 offense in the country, in every rating, and so they've been to like 8 straight Sweet 16s or 6 straight Sweet 16s. So Mark Few's been there so much that could be a really tough round of 32 game if they get by Georgia, which I think they will. I don't think Georgia has enough, but that could still be a good game.
Absolutely. I firmly believe that. And then Clemson McNeese. Clemson's had a good year. Clemson's had a really good year, and to be a 5 seed, I definitely think Houston has a tough draw going. I mean,
Yeah.
because it could be winner of Gonzaga, Georgia. Gonzaga, like you said, can score. Georgia is pretty stout on defense, and then Clemson would play the versus McNeese. If Clemson wins, they'll play Purdue, and Purdue's a good team.
Yeah.
Purdue's a good team. They kind of stumbled out of the gate, and I mean Auburn put the whoop on them, but they beat Alabama at the beginning of the year when Alabama still had quite a bit of momentum. Um, and so I mean Houston's got a pretty good draw as well.
Yeah, and the Clemson McNeese State game, I think Clemson's going to win, but Will Wade has got it going on there. Like they're extremely good and they play extremely hard. Like the term that the teams take on the character of their coach. That's literally what these guys do.
Mm-hmm.
Like they play so stinking hard, 40 minutes in your face. We're gonna dunk it. We're gonna talk. We're gonna shoot it. I think Clemson beats them, but that could be a really, really another one of those 12-5 games that could be really good. And then you mentioned Purdue and High Point. I think Purdue will win, but High Point is like a top 10 offense, top 5 offense in the country in KenPom, which everybody wants to talk about now
Yeah,
is KenPom. If you look at KenPom, they're one of like the most efficient offenses in the country. So
absolutely.
if Purdue doesn't guard them, we're looking
Yeah,
at a chance for a 13-4 upset. Again, I think Purdue wins. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, I think those guys will get it done. But I like High Point a lot just because of their offense. I love efficient offense,
yeah.
efficient half court offense. And so some of these teams, like these mid majors that are just really, really good in the half court, I just have to talk about it. I just love
Absolutely.
it.
Well, and then something to look at for McNeese. Will Wade's been in Raleigh for 2 days,
Yeah,
talking to NC State. So
yeah.
we distractions. So I mean, he's got it going on. He's a cheater. I'll never like him. But him coming to Raleigh for a couple of
It's all
days, and
legal now.
well, yeah, but coming to Raleigh for a couple of days in the middle of NCAA tournament prep was I don't think that was a smart move on his point there.
Yeah.
If the reports are true. Now moving on to the 6 versus 11, it'll be Illinois versus the winner of Texas and Xavier. That'll probably be I mean, between North Carolina and San Diego State, that might be the matchup to watch for in the first four round. Texas versus Xavier. And so Texas has been playing their best ball of the year here as of late, which is what you want to see. But Xavier is a tough team to get through.
Yep. I think Texas will win it, and that has nothing to do with the SEC. I just like Trey Johnson a lot. Arthur Kaluma's really good. And I don't think Xavier is that. They're like one of those teams with their quad
Mm-hmm.
one record being so booty. I don't think that they're that good of a basketball team. And Texas beating A&M, and they played Tennessee tough. So I think Texas will win that game and then play Illinois, which that'll be a good 6-11 game as well.
Yeah. And then moving on, Kentucky versus Troy. Troy making it was awesome to see. It's the first time since 2017, 2018.
Yep.
And so they had a good year. They had a tough year. The couple games we did get to watch, one game we did watch, they blew a lead to Arkansas State at home, and I hated it. But I just don't like Arkansas State. Never have, never will. But Kentucky Troy, that could be a tough game for Kentucky because Troy plays hard. If Troy takes care of the basketball, that's going to be a tough game. Those Rigsby boys are tough.
Yeah, and
But
then
Kentucky,
Connerway, who's the player of the year.
yeah, and Connor Way's the player of the year for the Sun Belt when the Sun Belt has some decent teams to it. And so, but the hardest thing for Kentucky is if Lamont Butler doesn't play. They're
That's
already
what I was
out
thinking.
their top 2 point guards for the rest of the year with Jackson Robinson with the injuries. But Lamont Butler only playing 8 minutes the other night and then getting hurt. It's going to be tough for them. He's got a full week to
Yeah.
recover because I think they play. Yeah, they play on the 21st. They play Friday, so would they go Friday to Friday, or
Yeah.
Saturday to Friday, or yeah, Friday to Friday because they lost to Alabama.
Yeah. And
So
yeah, again, I've mentioned this about a lot of these games, but if Troy can defend and hold on to the basketball, they can hang with them. I don't think they'll beat them, but if they can guard, at least push them off the 3-point line. Auburn and Alabama did one thing great when they played Kentucky. Well, Bama played them 3 times and did it every time, and they pushed them off the 3-point line
hmm
because they can shoot it. But Auburn held them to like 4 made threes. Bama held them to 5 made threes the other night in the tournament, and they beat them. If you can push them off the 3-point line, make them take tough twos, keep their big off the rim,
hmm
or just let him get his and stop everybody else. It's
Yep.
going to be a tough task for Troy, but they've got the guys on offense that can score. So if they don't turn the basketball over and they guard a little bit, if they can keep Kentucky under 80 points, they have a chance to win.
hmm
It's really really hard to do because Mark Pope's got a great offense.
He really does. And something that I think Bruce Pearl has headed up because he's been doing it for several years now. But you see a lot of teams running more sets and more plays. They're kind of getting away from the NBA of run around or penetrate, kick out, penetrate, kick out. Now, still a lot of teams still do that because that's how Alabama runs. But you're seeing a lot more of these teams being successful by running sets, pin down screens, the horn sets, all of those things. They're running those sets, and it has really benefited a lot of teams.
Yep.
So
And then
go
you
ahead.
look at that 7-10 UCLA Utah State game. I'm going to pick Utah State. Yeah. I'm going to go Utah State over UCLA. I'm just going to enjoy when this week is over and those games happen, and I come back in here and every upset that I'm picking is going to be absolutely wrong. But Utah State, that's another 10-7. I think they'll beat UCLA. UCLA is really good on defense, but I think Utah State can score, and I think they're going to
I think
beat
their
UCLA.
scoring will overpower that defense. And then you have the number 2 seed Tennessee and Wofford.
They'll beat them by 20.
Yeah, Wofford being 19 and 15 doesn't give me any kind of confidence unless Tennessee's just going to come in bummed out after today. I mean, Tennessee had to go to the gauntlet for the SEC
Yeah.
tournament. They had a hard fought game against Auburn, and then they had to go through the buzzsaw that is Florida. So
Yep.
you got hopefully they can recover because they play Thursday. So
Mm-hmm.
they tough for them. Tough for them. Um,
Like off the gut, I want to say Tennessee can make the Final Four, but they just always find a way to choke in March. And so I'm assuming I don't know which game it'll come in here. Probably that Houston game. I think this is probably when they'll lose. But Tennessee has found their offense, but the way they play, they can't win a championship. They can guard and all this stuff, but they'll foul too much in March, and then they rely on free throws. So if you're not getting to the free throw line, like you're not Zakai Ziegler's not going to get every call like he does in an SEC game.
uh,
It's a different game in the tournament, and they know that, but that's why I genuinely believe that's why, because they can't hit shots half the time and they rely on free throws. That's why they beat Auburn. Auburn couldn't make free throws. They made all theirs. Today they were getting to the line, but Florida was scoring every time they got the ball.
yep.
Just about every time they got the basketball, they scored. And you
But
can't rely on shooting free throws the entire time to win the game.
right. Well,
And then they had three guys that fouled out.
when Auburn played Florida, it was that way. Florida was hitting every single shot, and Auburn hung with them, which showed how good of Auburn. But Florida could not miss. Florida could not miss, and so we've gone through all the games, and we talked a little bit about them. And what game sticks out the most to you? Like, which one are you most excited to watch for?
Dude, these 9-8 games are all nice. Staying like there, I would say probably that Louisville Creighton.
Yeah, Louisville Creighton is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good one. If we're looking at one of those 12-5 games, I really want to see this Colorado State team play Memphis. I think that'll be a good one. And then there was another one that I wanted to point to. I think that Arizona Akron game at 13-4 could be good as well.
Yeah,
All the
I
8-9
think.
games, of course.
Yeah,
But the New Mexico Marquette game, that's a 10-7. That one could be good. The 2 seeds versus the 15s and all of those, I don't think any of those will be close. I think they'll all be 20-point plus games.
hmm
And so,
I think the one I'm anxious to see is how Yale does against Texas A&M, because Texas A&M coming in a letdown, losing to Texas. Either they're going to come in with something to prove, or they're going to come in with the hangover of that loss over them, and Yale can come in, and because Yale has nothing to lose, and they'll do the same thing they did to Auburn
so
last year.
I told you some of my upsets. Do you have an upset that you see in that first round that's happening?
Well, like I was just saying, I think Yale has a very good shot at upsetting Texas A&M. I think that's
If
very
they can
big.
make shots, I think they can do
Yeah,
it.
I definitely think that's a big possibility. I wouldn't be surprised if Liberty knocks off over Oregon. I really would not be
I
surprised.
like that
Now,
one.
watch Oregon come out and win by 20, but I would not be surprised if Liberty comes out and beats Oregon, and I hope it happens.
Yeah.
I hope it happens. Just a couple more things a couple of questions I have for you to talk about this for this year, and then we'll be done for tonight. Something something interesting this year is I feel like this year has not only been a stacked field of teams for the tournament, right? Because I really think this is one of the better brackets we've had in recent memory, for me personally. But also, a lot of freshmen have been stepping up this year. You look at Alabama, you got LeBaron Philon. You look at Auburn, you got Tahad Pettiford, who's only had one or two bad games all year long. You go to Indiana, they got those two outstanding freshmen there. And you've mentioned
That's
several
Creighton.
freshmen.
I mean, no, not Creighton. Rutgers. That's where those
Rutgers,
freshmen
you're
are.
right. Rutgers, right? That's right. Apologies, but when you look throughout entirety of college basketball, Cooper Flag, so forth and so on, seems to be the year of the freshmen. Do any of these freshmen come back? Cooper Flag's hinted at it, but with all the money that's been thrown around and talked about, do any of these freshmen come back to play?
I think you'll see LeBaron Philon in an Alabama jersey next year. I think you'll see Tahad Pettiford in an Auburn jersey. I think Flag will go to the draft. I think Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper from Rutgers will go to the draft. Um,
What about Trey
I
Johnson
think
from Texas?
I think he'll
Because
go to the draft.
he's a good guard, but he's on the smaller side like Tahad is.
Yeah,
The
the reason I don't
NBA
think
is
Tahad's
not.
going to the draft is because he's a 6-man.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the reason, unless your last name is James, you're not seeing a lot of small guards being drafted and used right away in the NBA, in the modern day NBA. Everybody's going bigger right now, which is understandable, and I have no problem with it. But you see, like Jared Harper is a lot better than Bronny James is, in my opinion, and he's overseas somewhere, or he's in the G League still. You're not seeing these smaller guards go, but they're dominating in college right now.
Yeah. I mean, the Trey Johnson thing, I think that that he's going to go to the draft just because, like, he's just talked about he's a lottery pick. Like he's picked it to be drafted in the lottery, so you can't turn down that. You get more money in college, obviously, probably most likely for him. But I just don't think you turn it down if you're in the lottery as they go. Derek Queen from Maryland, I think he'll probably go to the draft too. He could come back, but I think he would go to the draft as well. But he's really, really good.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
I
think
definitely.
Flag's going. I think that's just a conversation. I remember back when Jabari Smith was at Auburn, and they said that Jabari might come back. I mean,
Well,
Cooper
Chad,
Flag's been the number one pick in the draft since the sophomore year of high school.
that's true. Well, someone who is coming back that probably shouldn't is I fully believe Chad Baker Mazara will come back because of the Diego Pavia rule, where
Yeah,
junior college guys will get 3 years of eligibility. Now, Chad Baker Mazara has another. He'll be 26 years old. Dude's older than I am. I've been working a full time job at a church and at school for 2 years now, and that dude's still playing college basketball.
I'm not going to defend him, but he didn't start college till he's 20.
That's true. I mean, he's from the Dominican.
So technically, he's been in college for 5 years. So the people wanting to say like he doesn't have a degree and all this stuff, he's been in college forever. He's been in college 5 years. This is my fifth year.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if he doesn't have a degree at the end of this year, then you can clown him. I mean, I'll have my degree in May, but I mean, if we're clowning fifth year seniors, then I'm on that train. They can clown me, I guess.
Yours is a different situation, and we won't talk about it here. But um, anyway, there's so much more we didn't talk about, and we really didn't go through and pick each game, and we'll do that at a later time and release it before all these games are done. But um, there's so much to talk about, so many storylines, so many headlines, so many upsets to be had. I'm excited for this year.
Yeah, this is gonna be. It's a stacked tournament. There's gonna be a lot of upsets in here. I don't know where they're gonna come from. Every time you fill out a bracket, like if you just go with your gut, half the time you're gonna look at the final four and say, "Oh, it's chalk." Like it's gonna be like a couple of one seeds, a couple of two seeds, or three one seeds. So all these one and two seeds aren't gonna make the final four. So I mean, the brackets. Nobody's gonna have a perfect bracket either. It'll probably be done after the second day. But this is a stacked lineup. I mean, from one to 16, everybody can win. So
Very true. Very true. Well, appreciate you guys joining us again. Go ahead, hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss out on this March Madness that we're going to go through. We're going to break down some games. We're going to talk about some people and teams and coaches, and we're really going to dive into this. And then when the fall rolls around, we'll hope to be more consistent. But definitely don't want to miss out on the March Madness this college basketball season. So hit the subscribe button, share us with your friends, and we'll see you in a few days. Peace.
War Eagle.